Guys, I actually finished it. I finished my 2024 crochet temperature blanket, and what a project this was. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Jacqueline. This is Trellis and Trails Homestead, and I talk about everything from gardening, canning, sourdough baking, and apparently now crocheting when you don't know how to crochet. I started this project back in January of 2024, so it is actually New Year's Day today, and I just finished it yesterday. This was my very last row, as you can see the pink at the top, for a 30-degree day yesterday. And I started this project without knowing how to crochet. And you may be like, what? How did you do such a massive project without knowing how to crochet? And I mean, it looks good. I obviously learned in the meantime. But just to show you, when I started in January, my blanket looked very different because I didn't know that I was doing the wrong stitch for about a month and a half. My cats, you may hear them running around in the background because they love when I have this blanket out. I am joking saying I made like a $300 blanket for my cats because they love it and they just want to lay in it all the time, which I guess isn't the worst thing ever. So when I started in January, you can see it's basically like a slip stitch instead of a single crochet stitch. And I don't know all of the stitches or any intricacies other than like a single crochet stitch. Because again, I started this project and I had never crocheted anything in my life. So here we are. But just so you can see, about a month or so in, the pattern changed from the slip stitch to I think it was this green one right here, this purple one actually, to a single crochet stitch instead of the slip stitch pattern. So you can see the difference right here. But honestly, when you look at the whole blanket, you don't really notice it. I'm sure a crocheter who actually knows what they're doing would be able to notice it. But just for the everyday, ordinary person, I don't think that it's that noticeable. And honestly, when I look at it, I don't really think much of it either. What I do actually notice more than that, and it's gonna be really hard, you won't be able to see it probably in the video because this blanket is massive. I'll have to try to give you like the full thing so you can see it. I'm not gonna be able to hold it up. I'm gonna have to lay it down so you can see the whole thing. But I definitely, this was in the beginning. I don't know what happened here. I haven't cut the little phrase off at the end yet, but it kind of got messed up, and so it's not even right there. But there's also many other spots where it's a little uneven, and then it kind of like narrows in at the bottom. So I started with, I don't know exactly, I think I was trying to do 200 stitches across. I think it actually ended up being like 188 at some point, and then I think it got down to like 100 stitches. So obviously it's like smaller at the end. You can stretch it out fairly enough where it's not incredibly noticeable, but I don't really even know where I'm gonna put this blanket to begin with. Because it is so long, it's basically as long as a bed, if not longer. And I'm not gonna put it on a bed like the long way at least. I think if anything, I'll just fold it up and put it at the end of like the guest bed or something. We're gonna get into what I would do different about this blanket, but it is so heavy. I have a blanket ladder downstairs in my living room, but I would never be able to hang this on there. Number one, it's too long, and number two, it's too heavy for it. I think it would actually break it. So let's dive on in and talk about what I enjoyed about this project, what I learned from this project, what I would do differently, and my plans for 2025 crochet projects. Guys, this blanket is bigger than me. It's so large. So we started in January, and that would be here of 2024. And then I crocheted this blanket for 365 days. So we finished on December 31st of 2024. It is a full year-long temperature blanket. It's actually so warm because it's so large and so heavy. It's so nice to wrap up with. We actually got snow last night, so it's a bit of a chilly day here in Colorado. And this is actually a perfect day for a blanket like this to cozy up with. So I did the high temperatures for each day. I would go on my weather app, track the temperature every single day. And I wasn't necessarily crocheting a row every single day. I usually would get a few days at a time, and then I would crochet that whole stretch of days. So I was keeping up with the temperatures on a notes app in my phone and just keeping up with the high temperature every single day. So I have a little guide here for what colors I chose to use for each temperature. And I'm really glad that I chose the colors that I did for each, because I feel like it just like kind of blended together so nicely, and it's so beautiful. And I do love the colors. I do love the yarn. The yarn that I used is like a medium weight. It's the Lion's Brand Reuse yarn. It's the recycled yarn, but it is really heavy. And had I known it was going to be so heavy, I might would have picked a different yarn, because I just didn't think about putting 365 days worth of yarn together, how heavy that would turn out. And this is just a pretty heavy weight yarn. So I have this little guide that I made just with a piece of cardboard. I had seen other people use this method, and I wrote on here temperature blanket, and I just tied in the color that I wanted to use for each temperature. And you can see it says like 0 to 10, 10 to 20, instead of 0 to 10 and then like 11 to 20. Don't worry about that. I didn't have any days really where that was a problem. And if it was like 20 at that point, then I just went with the 20 to 30. So there weren't many days where I would need to figure out between 20 degrees if I should use the pink or the gray or whatever was on here. So I just didn't think about it when I was making it to do 0 to 10 and then 11 to 20 instead of 10 to 20 like I did. But here we are. It wasn't a problem, and that's something that if I did this again, I would know to make that a little more specific on my chart here. So I wrote the names of the yarn as well, of each color, just because when I was trying to reorder the colors online, there's so many different variations of kind of the same color, so it was kind of hard to tell online which one I needed. So I had to go back, look at all the yarn that I have, figure out which color was which, and then order it based on the name of that color instead of just looking at the color online. And that seemed to work really well. So like for instance, the brown color is cider, the green is evergreen, the purple is cosmos. So it was just much easier to order it based on the name of the color instead of the actual color, if that makes sense. So that's what we did for our temperature blanket. I picked the highs of the day. We went off of this chart and we crocheted the matching color for that temperature. So we started with lots of greens, purples, a couple of browns, some pinks, and then we had one single row. This didn't happen on any other part of the blanket. We had two very cold temperatures, and you can see it kind of, the way that I was doing the stitch, you can see the colors in between, but one very cold day, less than 0, and 1 0 to 10 degree day. So yeah, that didn't happen any other time during the year. During December, we had a pretty mild month, so we had like 30, 40, 50 degree days even. So January last year was a little cold, but not too bad. It was mostly 30s to 50s with a few 20 degrees thrown in. And then we kind of just go on from there with some 30, 40, 50, even 60 degree temps with the brown. And then we got to spring and we started having some 70 degree temps with this teal color here. And kind of got chilly again throughout the spring. Spring is usually pretty chilly in Colorado, and we get lots of snow in the spring, so I'm gonna stretch this out because it is large. And then we started getting to summer where we had 80 degrees, 90 degrees, a few more 70s throughout there. This yellow was 80s, and the majority of our summer temps were in the 80s, so we have lots of yellow. This cinnamon color was 90 degrees. We had some of those. When it gets to 90 degrees, it doesn't stay there for very long. You can see there's like 3 days worth here. And then back to 80s, 70s, 60s even, but mostly 80s throughout the summer. And then we start creeping back down in the fall to 70s again, 60s, and then back to 50s, 30s. There was another 20 degree day here. And then we finished out the month with 50s, 40s, and then 30 degrees yesterday. So that is the full blanket. I'll lay this out on the floor for you to see the whole thing because I know it's really hard to judge the size of it here. But you can just see, look how big it looks laying on top of me right now. It's massive. It's so heavy, so huge. So it's huge. I don't even have it stretched out completely because this is the area in my like front living room and this is a big space. This blanket is bigger. So here's the last row here, this pink color. And then we go all the way back up through the summer, spring, and up into the winter. So you can see this blanket is massive. You can't necessarily tell just because I don't have it stretched out completely that the edges are a little off, and it's definitely wider up here than it is down towards the bottom. It definitely gets a little bit more narrow, but really it's okay. Like I said, I love it. It was something really cool to complete with not knowing how to even start, and I'm really proud of myself for finishing this. So let's get into why I wanted to make this blanket, why I decided to do a project when I didn't even know where to start, and just some of the things that I would do differently. I had seen on social media these temperature blankets in 2023, I guess, and I was like, that is so cool. I don't know how to crochet, I don't know how to knit, I don't know what any of that even means. There was no one around me at the time that could teach me how to crochet. I didn't have any friends that were doing it. I literally knew nothing about it. So I watched a couple of YouTube videos and I kind of sort of learned how to crochet. Kind of sort of because you saw what happened in the first month and a half of the year. I obviously was doing the wrong stitch, figured it out, started doing the right stitch, and then ended up with this beautiful pattern. I think it actually adds character to my blanket to see this stitch and then see the correct stitch. I think it'll be funny to look back on and be like, oh, that's when I didn't know how to crochet, but I decided to crochet a blanket. This is definitely something that I'll keep forever. I do treasure it. I had a lot of mixed feelings about it as I was making it. Most of the time I really enjoyed it. I like crocheting, I like the process of it. I feel like it keeps my hands busy while my mind is, you know, doing other things, or kind of helps even calm me down in a way. I feel like it's actually just like a relaxing little hobby, especially when I was able to sit down at night and just sit there crochet while I was watching TV or whatever else. It started to get too big where I wasn't wanting to bring it out every day to do that. So I was just getting a week or two's worth of temperatures at one time and then crocheting them all towards the end. So I didn't have to drag it out every single time. It's been sitting in a corner of my living room for the entire year. So I'm actually glad to be able to free up that spot too, because I'm gonna put this somewhere else. I'm really sad because I feel like I don't really have a spot for it. I don't know what I'm gonna do with it. I think I underestimated how large it was gonna be. When you think about 365 rows long versus 100-ish rows wide, that's a really, really long blanket. So I definitely didn't think about that when I was starting this project. It wouldn't have mattered, I would have done it anyways. I just went into it without having an actual place for it. Or a real purpose for it. It's a blanket, it has many purposes, and that's not a problem. And like I said, my cats love it. They love to lay on it, but I'm not gonna just leave it out for them probably, unless I decide to put it on the guest bed. I'm just really not sure yet. If you guys have any really creative ideas of what I could do with this, please let me know. So going back, I had no idea how to crochet. I'd seen people on social media doing this project. I thought it was super cool and I wanted to do it too. The funny thing is that I started tracking the temperatures the first week in January, but I didn't actually start making the blanket until I think it was mid or even later January. I feel like we're actually 18 or so days into January, if I remember correctly. So I was tracking the temps and keeping a record of them, but I didn't actually start making the blanket until about halfway into the month. So I went and I got the yarn that I wanted, I picked it out, and I picked out all the colors, And I did have to reorder or rebuy the yarn several times. But with my last yarn order, I think I just ordered a little bit too much. So I have a lot of extra yarn in almost every single color. Because instead of buying it as needed, I just bought like a big shipment of it so that I wouldn't run out. If I had to do this over, I would definitely just wait until I ran out of a color before buying more, or buy 2 or 3 maybe at one time. You just don't know how much you're gonna need because you don't know what the temperatures are gonna be for the whole year. So I think it's just hard to estimate exactly how much of each color you'll need. I only got one of the white, the less than 0, and the blue, the 0 to 10 degrees, because I knew that we likely wouldn't have many of those temperatures throughout the year. But then the ones like the 60s, 70s, 80s, even 40s and 50s, I ended up using a lot of purple. We had a lot of 40-degree days during this year. But I feel like even more so the 80s and 70s during the summertime, I used a lot of the yellow and the teal color. And yeah, it's just really hard to estimate how much you're gonna need. So next time I would know to just let the color run out first or get close to running out before buying more of that color. I have a lot of this yarn left over in these colors, and I could just keep this and make something else with the colors, make another temperature project, maybe not necessarily a blanket, but something else with the same colors for the temperatures. I don't actually know if I'm gonna do that. Unless you guys have any really creative, awesome ideas, I might start keeping a track of the temperatures throughout January this year for a little bit, and then kind of decide, sort of like I did last year, if I'm gonna actually make it or not. I for sure am not gonna make another blanket again. Not when like this. Maybe a variation of a blanket in some form, but I don't exactly know what or how because I'm clearly not an experienced crocheter. Do not come here and watch this video if you want to learn how to crochet because I can tell you that is exactly not what this video is about. So yeah, let me know if you guys have any ideas for something that I could do with the same temperatures. Something on a smaller scale would be great. I've seen a lot of you mention on my shorts a temperature snake, and that sounds so cool, and that's definitely something I would like to do some research on, look that up and see if maybe that's something I want to do. But I've not done that yet. But thank you guys for throwing that out and letting me know what you guys are doing. I'd love to hear more about if you guys did a temperature blanket for 2024 or any other sort of temperature crochet project. Let me know what you did. I would really love to hear that. So while we're talking about ordering the yarn sort of in bulk, more than I needed at one time, we can talk about the cost of this. I had no idea that this blanket would cost as much as it did. I obviously had never bought yarn before. I didn't know what yarn costed. I was paying about $9 a skein for each color. So that was usually because the yarn was on sale at Joann's Fabric. Sometimes I had a coupon for it. I have extra, so it's really hard to know exactly how much went into this blanket. But if I had to guess, I would probably say between $200 and $250 worth of yarn for this project, which is a lot. I think I probably spent over $300 for all the yarn that I bought, but I bet about $200 to $250 went into this actual blanket. So again, I probably still would have done it, considering the cost, but also I think that's just something to know. Consider the cost before you make something like this because it definitely is the most expensive blanket I've ever owned. So I was seeing everyone else making these temperature blankets. I thought it would be a really cool project to do. Despite not knowing how to crochet, I figured I could learn quickly. And I feel like for the most part I did. There were a couple of YouTube channels that were helpful, but I kind of just like had to do it myself to figure it out. And if there's one takeaway from this whole video, I think it should just be, don't be afraid to start something new. This is a hobby, a craft that I had no idea where to start, but I started it and I got through it and I actually persisted and finished, and here we are with a fully completed 2024 temperature blanket. So much much like anything in life, I think, you know, considering the risk, obviously, I think that it's fun to just take a chance on something and to try something new, especially when it comes to hobbies or something that you've never done before. Just try it. You'll never know if you can do it if you don't try it. I could have, and I almost did actually. When I realized I was doing the wrong stitch, I got really upset and I was like, do I start the whole thing over? But that would be so much yarn that would have been wasted. And then I was like, there's no way to take it out because I've already cut each end to tie in like a new one for the next row. So there was no way I could go back and redo it. So I very much felt like I had already messed this entire project up and I didn't know where to go from there. But I just decided I was just gonna keep going. I was gonna do the new stitch, I was gonna do the correct stitch and just include it kind of where I left off, and we ended up with honestly a beautiful blanket. I again think it adds character and I think it's really fun just to see how far I came during this entire process, and it's just beautiful either way. I love the colors, I love how warm it is, and it's honestly like a weighted blanket because it's so heavy. So if you're into that, make sure to use like a medium weight yarn because you'll love it. But it's just probably not something that I would use on a regular basis for any kind of like, you know, blanket. I did think about draping it like on the back of my couch and just kind of having it there. I might still do that. I'm gonna check and see if that's something that I want to do today actually. My couch downstairs is up against the wall, so you would only see like the front part of it, but I don't think that would be a problem. I think it could look really cool. Or even if there's a way that I can drape it kind of along the corner of the couch, maybe I'll try something like that. We'll see what happens. So this is my encouragement to you. If there's something that you have been wanting to try or something that you want to try in the new year and you don't know where to start, maybe just look up a couple YouTube videos. Don't watch mine again because I'm not here to teach you how to crochet, but that goes with anything, not just crocheting or, you know, any sort of craft like hobby. That could be literally anything in your life that you want to do. Just take a chance on it and see what happens. I'm really, really glad that I did this. And it was a struggle sometimes when I felt like I wasn't, you know, getting the stitch right or the ends right or the size right or something like that. But overall, I really enjoyed the project and I'm really glad that I did it. My foot is falling asleep under this thing. So I just kind of tied the ends off. I know, again, I am not an expert in any form or fashion on this. I know that there's a way that you can tie in your next color, like loop in your next color without having to cut it and tie them together. You guys probably know, I don't. Maybe I'll learn at some point, but I ended up when I got to the end of a row, tying in the new color and then cutting the old color off, and then just each time I needed to switch colors I would just tie the new color in. So I ended up with a lot of these like fringe pieces on the end, these loose ties, and I've tried to go through a little bit and just like tighten them because I feel like some of them are actually a little bit loose. I thought about cutting them just to make it look a lot nicer on the edges, and I might still do that, but I just haven't had time to do that yet before making this video. But you can see, in addition to it not being even, do you guys see how uneven that is? That's why I think I was getting some really random numbers. I wasn't counting every single stitch that I did to make sure that it was even. So I was ending up with long pieces on one side and then it gets short. So it's kind of like wavy looking. And then it just gets really narrow at the bottom. But I have all of these loose ends. I feel like it kind of looks like a frayed blanket. So I honestly might just leave it, but we'll see if it ends up kind of falling apart or not. And I have to tie them off and cut them off. I've seen some people end up like burning the edges just to make sure that it stays in place. But I don't exactly know if I'm going to do that. I thought about also sort of adding a border around it, probably in white, I think, and just going through and kind of putting a border around the edges to make it look a little more cohesive. I think that you can just loop it into each little hole on the ends here and just go around the entire, you know, blanket all four ways and tie it off, and then you have a border. Maybe you guys can also let me know about that because I'm not sure if that's a thing or not. But I, again, just haven't had time to do that, obviously, because today's January 1st. But I'm going to think about it and think about if that's something that I want to do. I kind of like the look of it without a border. I think it's pretty cool. But I don't know if a border would kind of tie it all together or not, or if it even really matters. So my plans for 2025 crochet, I'll think about if I want to do a temperature project or not. Right now I'm going to say probably not, but we'll see what happens. I want to try to figure out other stitches, try to fine tune this stitch and like cutting ends off, tying ends in, things like that. And just sort of kind of fine tune my skills with basic crochet, because even though this took a whole year, I feel like I sort of just threw it together a little bit just because I only knew one way to do it. And that's just kind of how I did the entire project. So in addition to this yarn that I have left over from this project, I have just another small set of yarn for a specific tote bag that I wanted to make. And I attempted to make it in the summer and it was just really hard. It had daisies in it, so you had to kind of like interlace these colors to add the daisies in, and it was just a challenge. And I feel like I was getting it very uneven. It was just really difficult to do. So if I decide to work on that project, I have the yarn and everything for it. I can go back and try to do that again. And then I have one other yarn color that I was gonna make some dishcloths with. So I might also do that because I feel like that would be a really easy project after doing this one. So I'm excited to try other things and just learn a little bit more about crochet. I don't want to go overboard this year with buying a lot of extra yarn or things for a project that I don't accomplish. I just don't want to end up with a bunch of yarn that I end up not using. So I don't know what we're going to get to in 2025 as far as the crochet goes, but we'll kind of see what happens. Right now, I'm just going to very much enjoy the break. I'm not going to think about crocheting anything for a little bit. Again, I might still track the temperatures just in case I decide on something, but I'm going to take a break from this for a little bit. It's been really, really fun and a really nice challenge. It's been very challenging. But again, it just proves to me that even if I have no idea where to start with a project, I can get it done, I can complete it, and I can turn it into something beautiful. So thank you guys so much for keeping up with my monthly updates that I've been posting on the shorts, and for just tuning in to watch this video on my temperature blanket. It means so much to me that you guys were as invested in this project as I was. And I hope that this is encouragement for you to start your own thing that you've been wanting to start for so long and just see where it leads you. I'm rooting for you all the way. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.